So today we're going to go through some of the predicted changes in the budget. Over the past few weeks, we've seen a lot of speculation of potential tax changes. Wealth tax has been mentioned, changes to tax reliefs have been mentioned, and more recently, changes to VAT. The backdrop is a very challenging environment. With the outlook of the UK economy looking bleak, with a fiscal deficit stubbornly high and inflation well above the Bank of England's base rate target of 2%, it looks like it's going to be a really challenging budget for the Chancellor. She'll have to do tax rises in order to increase revenues. We'll only find out in the next few weeks when the autumn statement takes place. It's a key landscape, key milestone event in the financial calendar. And it's only in the next few weeks where we'll find out what she'll announce and the impact of those to both employers and business owners. Today, we're going to hear from our experts. We're going to go through some of their predictions and some of the potential changes that we'll hear in the next few weeks. So before I turn to the experts, I'm just going to go through some key themes that I believe are going to play out in the budget in the next few weeks. The first is raising revenue for businesses. I think there's a stated mandate from the government not to increase taxes for working people. So where does that leave them? I think there's two key areas: high net worth individuals, and we saw those changes in last budget, but also businesses. I think there may be some more increases in employers' national insurance. That was a key change last year. There may be some more changes to corporate tax or removal of certain reliefs. I think one area of tax that we may see some changes is around VAT. The next theme, I believe, is a broader economy. I think the economy is in a very difficult position. We've seen that since April when the national insurance increases played out, but we've also seen the US tariffs having a negative effect on the UK economy. So I think the Chancellor is going to be in a very difficult position to target growth for the UK, balancing the books with increasing revenue. The third theme, which I think is more of a curveball from my perspective, is VAT. It's one area that is often overlooked at budget times. Although we saw some minimal changes last year with an increase in the threshold, I think this year we might see some significant changes in the VAT regime. And it's great to see that we've got Louise here today who might go through some of those changes with us. Claire, potential changes in employment taxes. Last year we saw some significant changes to the employer's national insurance.
Yeah.
What do you expect to see this year?
So you've already mentioned, Praveen, that the government have pledged not to raise income tax and national insurance for working people. They have also announced freezes on thresholds until April 2028, known as fiscal drag, which means that more people, as wages increase, will be brought into paying higher taxes. I do expect that they will make an announcement about what's going to happen in future with those thresholds, whether they'll be frozen in future or whether there'll be some small increases on them. I would expect that to come out in the budget. I expect to see further restrictions and employer compliance requirements discussed as part of the budget. We know that HMRC have got more enforcement powers and that they've invested in enforcement, so I'm expecting to see more around the employment tax arena there. And they have already announced changes to the way that umbrella companies are going to be scrutinised going forward. PAYE and NIC liabilities will move to the end client using the services of an individual that's employed through an umbrella company or to the agency that engages with that umbrella company. So there will be a lot more policing around that. There'll be a lot more due diligence expected of businesses on their supply chains. And I think finally, probably the one that most people have heard about is potential changes to pension tax relief.
Okay.
There was a consultation completed by the government recently, which has suggested that there may be flat rate tax relief on pensions, and also that they may remove the NIC benefits that some people get through salary sacrifice schemes. We're yet to see how that'll play out, obviously, but we are expecting to hear a little bit more about that in the budget.
Okay. So I'm going to bring Kirsty in. Actually, in relation to corporate tax, what's your sense of direction of travel in corporate tax more recently and in this budget?
So I think in October 24, the government issued the corporate tax roadmap, and really that was all about stability. So they've they've predicted what they would like to see for the next for the term of the term of the government. And so they've kind of committed to keeping the corporation tax rate at 25% with the small profits rate at 19%. They've also committed to keeping cash allowances as they are. So we've got the £1 million annual investment allowance, and then we've got full expensing, which has got effectively no cap on it. So I think we're really unlikely to see any changes in the budget. In terms of other reliefs, things like R&D, we've had a lot of change in R&D over the last few years. So there's unlikely to be any changes there. What we might see next year, I think, in terms of R&D is potentially enhanced reliefs for certain sectors. We're really focusing on net zero and on energy. Perhaps those types of businesses will be given a preferential rate of R&D relief. I think we might see some changes in transfer pricing. There has been talk about simplifying the schemes and aligning them with other international schemes. We are potentially going to see a removal of the medium-sized definition for transfer pricing and a removal of the UK to UK transfer pricing.
Louise, there's lots of VAT rumours flying around. The most recent one was VAT on taxi fares. But what are your thoughts around what might happen from a VAT point of view?
Most of the speculation in the press is around changes to the VAT registration threshold. Obviously, in the spring budget 24, we had an increase from 85,000 to 90,000. Some commentators are thinking that we'll continue to see that upward trend with an increase to £100,000, and that's good news for small businesses and those businesses who are hovering around the VAT registration threshold at the moment, because then it'll be a period of time before they're brought into the VAT net. Other commentators are suggesting that we might slash the VAT registration threshold, and figures of around 30,000 are being talked about. Now, that has the unfortunate impact on smaller businesses and startups, it would increase the administrative burden to those businesses at a time when also they're navigating changes like the introduction of making tax digital for income tax. I don't think we'll see any changes around the VAT rate, because obviously the government's made the pledge that rates will stay the same. But what we might see is some differences with regards to what's potentially brought into the scope of zero rating or reduced rating reliefs.
Okay, thank you. Claire, back to you. In terms of national minimum wage, we're seeing an increased compliance activity by HMRC. Do you see more of that going forwards, or do you see some more changes to national minimum wage?
I think the answer is yes to both, if I'm completely honest. There were predictions that were updated that the Low Pay Commission had done just last month, which suggested that the national minimum wage rate is likely to go up to around £12.55 to £12.86, which is quite a significant increase against the £12.21 that we've got in place at the moment. The government has also confirmed that they intend for everybody who's 18 and above to be on the adult national minimum wage, with confirmation that they will advise further on this in late 2025, late 2026. So, autumn budget is probably the time that they're going to be communicating more on that. In terms of enforcement that we're seeing, there is a lot. They have a geographical focus, but also they've got kind of the whistleblowing helpline, and they follow up on every single national minimum wage that's brought before them. So we are seeing a lot, and what we're seeing is a lot of employers that think they're doing it right, but it can just be a small detail that makes them fall within the breach of national minimum wage.
So regular review of policies and how those are calculated to make sure.
Yeah, regular review of your policies, making sure you know your data, making sure you know which cohort of employees might be impacted by these changes, and adapting and planning for it as best as possible.
Good. And in terms of salary sacrifice,
yes,
it's been often mooted that might be a relief that is taken away. And do you think any changes are likely on salary sacrifice?
Potentially. I think rather than it being a change to salary sacrifice as such, it will be more a change to the way that you get your relief for pensions. Okay. So I think the mooting is around salary sacrifice for pensions. I don't think they'll make many changes to salary sacrifice as a whole. They brought in new rules called optional remuneration arrangements back in 2017, whereby they took away a lot of the benefits of salary sacrifice schemes. The only ones that could continue were the ones that basically helped the government pledges, so things like the green agenda, so electric vehicles, cycle to work schemes, and obviously pensions, saving for later life. I think in terms of salary sacrifice schemes, I would be surprised if they changed anything, but I think it would be more around the changes they made to pensions.
Okay. And Kirsty, in terms of any particular business sectors that should be paying particular attention in this year's budget, do you think there's particular targeted sectors that might be or foul of Chancellor's need to raise additional taxes?
I think potentially sort of the property rental businesses. I know they're talking about applying national insurance to rental income, and I think that could have quite a hit. Our rents are already sky high in some cities, and is that cost just going to be passed on to the tenants? I think the other sector is they're talking about reviewing business rates relief. Yeah. I know there's definitely talk about looking at, let's say, online warehousing and increasing rates for them. That might be fine as long as they support the high street and maybe potentially reduce the rates for them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and Louise, obviously the US tariffs caused quite a lot of disruption in the UK with exports and imports. From a VAT point of view, again, are there any areas that business owners and businesses need to be mindful or look out for in the budget that could, again, impact them?
Not necessarily directly related to the budget, but what we would always say with businesses that are involved in cross-border transaction is it's really important that you understand the detail of your supply chain. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you seek appropriate VAT and customs advice. As a result of the increase in tariffs, some businesses are looking at changing their supply routes, looking at changing their suppliers. And I think there's a lot of issues that come along with that. It's, understanding where do you pass on these additional costs? Can they be passed on in your pricing to your customers? Can contracts be revisited and renewed? So it's really just having that broad understanding of how the change in tariffs impact on your specific supply chains. And if you're looking to do any changes to that, make sure that they are properly thought through and you're seeking advice from both a VAT and a customs perspective, because you want to make sure that the origin of those goods is correctly determined and you're not falling foul of any unforeseen overseas VAT registration obligations due to changes.
Yeah, some great advice there. So just turning to and wrapping this up, if there's one measure that you'd like to see being introduced in the budget, Claire, what would that be?
I would like to see something similar to the corporation tax roadmap for employment taxes. I think over the last few years there's been a lot of surprises sprung on employers, and we've got a budget in November which only gives us 4 months before the start of the tax year for employers to prepare for any changes that are coming. And it would be nice to have some clarity to help employers plan. They usually forecast 3, 5, 10 years ahead. Giving somebody a change to implement that quickly is not going to help with them forecasting.
Okay, thank you. Louise, same question for you.
For me, it's just whether any further simplifications are going to be introduced. Obviously, there's been the consultation over the VAT capital goods scheme and the proposed increase in limits to land and property transactions, where it's going to increase from 250,000 to 600,000, and computers will be brought outside of the scheme, which is obviously helpful to businesses because it will impact fewer businesses. So I'll just be interested to see whether there's confirmation of the effective date of that change and whether any other simplifications will be brought in.
Okay, thank you. Kirsty?
I think there's been talk about bringing in a scheme where we can have advance clearances for R&D claims, so people can check in advance whether they actually are eligible. In addition to that, there's been talk about advance clearances for large projects. So if you're a company going to be seeking a lot of external investment, you need certainty about the taxes in the restructure, for example. Then you would be able to apply to HMRC and get clearance in advance. And I think that would just bring a lot of certainty to businesses and to their investors.
Okay, thank you. And just flipping that around, if there was lots of rumours around budget time, and we've seen lots of rumours over the last few weeks, if there's one rumour, Kirsty, that you're concerned about from a business owner's point of view, what would that be?
It's not so much a rumour, but I think it's going to happen is the inheritance tax for on companies, so the business relief. There's been so much chat about the effect on farmers and the agricultural property relief, but I think there's been less noise about companies. So, for example, at the moment, if you've got a company worth £2 million, then it would pay no inheritance tax if it's passed to the next generation. Whereas from April next year, we're expecting there to be about a £200,000 tax charge on that. And I think people haven't realised the impact that this could actually have on businesses and the economy. Where is that money going to come to pay for it? Are we going to have to break up businesses and sell assets to just pay the tax? Yeah. So I think I would rethink that if that was possible.
Yeah. From my point of view, I think the pension changes that were announced last year have an equal kind of damaging effect. And Louise, again, lots of rumours around VAT. What's your biggest kind of concern from the rumours that you've heard?
I think my fear is if the VAT registration threshold is decreased rather than increased, obviously that's a barrier to growth for smaller businesses. It also brings with it a number of increased challenges for HMRC, like how will they facilitate all of these extra companies that they've got to register, and what impact will that have on already VAT registered businesses who are trying to get advice and support from HMRC? Yeah,
I agree with you. And you made an excellent point before about MTD. I think any VAT changes by reducing that threshold at the same time, business owners, I think, about MTD, I think it's just going to be a recipe for disaster. Claire, on to you.
My main concern is in respect of any changes that they make to pension tax relief and potentially taking NIC relief away. I think that the government, if they bring in these changes, they need to give employers time to adapt and to plan for them. One of the things we've seen in the last few years is that payroll software, for example, can't be updated quickly enough to put the changes through. I think they need to allow employers the ability to actually prepare for this.
So thank you, Claire. Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Kirsty. That was all very insightful. The autumn budget will always bring challenges and opportunities, but the key point is to plan so that you can stay ahead of the changes that may be announced. If you like tailored advice on any of the changes and understand how they may impact you, your family or your business, please reach out to one of us or your usual Azets advisor, or please refer to our website, which has got plenty of resources. Thank you.